so I have some thoughts.
Hellboy is one of the most celebrated comic books ever created not dealing with superheroes. Hellboy follows a titular character as he ventures through myth, legend, fairy and folktales, fighting to keep humanity safe while also battling the monster he is destined to become. A monster everyone tells him he will become and who will destroy the world. It's smart, scary and incredibly creative. At least that's what the fans say, and while I am a huge fan of all these elements, fantasy, horror, and mythology, I can't help but think that while I read Hellboy, I found it more disappointing than I initially thought I would. Which is a shame, to be sure. I really like concepts like these. And I just felt that it was really overhyped. Which brings me to ask a more important question. Is Hellboy that good?
How dare you question something we like?
Shut your pie hole! Part 1. Hellboy, the character. If you want your story to be engaging and interesting, characters are very important. The more you like a character, the more you can relate to a character, the more you understand a character, not even relate to them, is kind of vitally important to make you care about them in either completely mundane or fantastical settings. It should be said that Hellboy does have a large roster of characters, however, the characters aren't present enough to make the reader care that much about them. I remember them more for their designs than their contributions. Take Abe Sapien for instance. If you have exclusively read Hellboy without looking it up, what does Abe do? I would argue that the villains of Hellboy are far more engaging than any of the heroes in Hellboy, like the Baba Yaga who wants vengeance, and the Pig Demon who wants vengeance, and Nimue who wants vengeance, and okay, some villains in Hellboy aren't exclusively out for vengeance. Some just want Hellboy to accept his destiny of becoming this apocalyptic figure. Outside of Igor though, I can't think of a single character that falls outside of those very specific motivations. So, we'll have to look at Hellboy as a character. What drives him? What is he like? If you believe what people say, he's a powerful paranormal investigator who struggles with both his demonic heritage and his desire to become human. Thus, hell, but also boy. But is he a good boy? It does go into these thoughts, but it feels more rare than anything else. For the most part, Hellboy is a tough guy who knows most lore like the back of his hand and uses it to punch monsters seemingly without much thought beyond how to defeat whatever is trying to eat him now. If there is one thing that Hellboy clearly does is reject destiny, despite his true form having a lot of power. He drinks himself to oblivion just based on all the horrors he faces on a daily basis. Many people read this as empathic behavior towards humanity, which he masks behind an indifferent demeanor because of the horror he has faced. While this is true some of the time, I often find Hellboy to act more apathetic and just wants to do his job or defend himself from things attacking him. I wonder, does Hellboy drink because of the horrors he faces, or just because he's bored? Because if I had to describe Hellboy through most of the comic, I would compare him to a 90s comic book character from Image Comics. He's so strong and cool and drinking, which is as good as character development, right? Oh, he smokes, that makes him edgy and cool. He doesn't like the Bureau because they are monster racists. Even though that has never happened before and he was treated equally up until the comics said it was an issue. Hellboy is arguably at the least boring when he was a kid and has emotions. When he was a kid, he bonds with Brom, his adoptive father, and they clearly care for each other. Here's how he reacts to his adoptive dad dying in the comic when he's an adult. Well, I guess he's dead. Imagine if Hellboy cared. That he had moments of mourning and had full conversations with people that doesn't just appear in one issue. Instead, they are sidelined for the plot, just explain the plot, or are eaten by a giant eldritch abomination. Speaking of which, the horror! It's bad. Let me make it clear here. Hellboy isn't bad at being horror because the character designs are bad. They're actually really good. Or that the pacing is bad, or, if you found segments in Hellboy to be scary, I'm not gonna take that away from you. If you found it scary, go ahead. But I would like to point out that Hellboy is so overpowered that it rarely seems to matter, and it really sucks the horror out of it. People often look at the story The Corpse as an example of how good it is at being a horror story. It's a story where Hellboy has to bury a body in a grave before sundown to rescue a baby, and while it is fun to see this composition, heavy use of shadows, and seeing the legend of Teague O'Kane adapted, is it really that scary? For the uninitiated, the legend of Teague O'Kane is an old Irish legend about Teague, who is a lazy womanizer who lives off his father's money. He gets cursed to bury a corpse by daybreak, and after being rejected by the ghosts and skeletons of the first two graves, he manages to bury the corpse in the third grave right before dawn and changes his way. He marries the woman he was last with, and because of that, his father puts him back in his will. So, a little bit of a weird moral, just be with the woman you womanized and you get your dad's money after all. Bit of weird moral, but aside from that, it makes a lot of sense. Teague O'Kane has always been a very lazy individual, and therefore trying to overcome that by burying the body, which he will fail if he is being lazy, will curse him, and the fairies will take pleasure of him, which either refers to torture or something else I'd rather not think about. But the point is that there are personal stakes that he has to overcome in order to succeed. Now, what does Hellboy do? In Hellboy has to punch a big monster in the face while holding some sort of amulet he just has. Tense! We already know Hellboy can beat basically anything. So what does he really risk by not succeeding? Well, he'll fail at his task. Also, he won't kiss the baby he rescued when she has grown up because he ages differently, but that's something else. And that was The Corpse. The story that everyone refers to when they say that Hellboy is great at being horror. Yippee. Hellboy is for the most part aping stories without the tension. One of the biggest inspirations for the comic is the works of H.P. Lovecraft with his cosmic horror. But Hellboy never breaks down as the impossibly large threats of the universe threaten to break under him. No, he's too cool for school! Instead of going into the depths of his character and challenge a part of him, they just throw bigger and bigger challenges at him, which would have been okay if he weren't invincible. He gets impaled, but it doesn't bother him. Hellboy is so cool, and he got back from being drained from blood. An army of the dead, get ready to re-die. I look into these pages people have described as horror, and I think, what is so scary about this? Hellboy would just punch his way out of any issue he faces. Well, maybe the tension comes not from the attempt at horror, but maybe from the apocalypse that has been built up for most of the Part 3 story. And Hellboy plays it fast and loose with themes, horror, character, basically anything. Now, it should be stated, I have only read the library issues, so there might be a margin of error in my thinking about Hellboy. But it does mean that I have the entirety of the intended main story at hand. So how is it? Well, Hellboy was clearly planned out with a lot of early hints. Hints of his bloodline, the Black Dragon who ends up as the main antagonist in the final issue, and the changeling who takes the baby in the corpse is actually vital to the story. It was planned out, but here's the question, why does half of it feel so rushed? When the Creatures from Beyond sees the story of Hellboy, it has an incredible pacing and great development that feels so well earned. Then we get to Hellboy, and he meets people we've never met, or people we wish he didn't meet again in that kind of setting, and we're expected to care. Who is this person? Answer, a ghost Hellboy cared about. Would have been nice if he was memorable enough for me to be able to recognize him if he was in the comic before, or if Hellboy showed that he cared about that person at all rather than just slouching on the couch and having it explained to us. While the other world has a development that brings the Black Dragon ever closer, we spend all our time with Hellboy as he stumbles from place to place beating up folklore and acts like a pincushion when there's need for tension. Oops, doesn't matter because Hellboy can literally lose all the blood in his body and he's just fine afterwards. Just fine. Great. I feel like the driving force behind a lot of why Hellboy kinda works for people is because of the story. You wondered if Pig Demon would try to get revenge, you wondered how the Baba Yaga would fit into the story, and you wondered how the battle against the Black Dragon would go. And what it would be like. And then you read it and you sit there going, what the fuck, Hellboy? I was excited, goddamn! Hellboy in Hell answers the question nobody thought to ask. What if the story was Hellboy and no main antagonist? Boring. It's just Hellboy wandering around apathetically until he stumbles over something to do. Then he solves it with violence and then it's over. Next thing. Great. I love it. Hellboy in Hell is Hellboy at its worst. Which is still pretty good, actually. Now, I may have sounded a bit extremely negative when it comes to Hellboy, but I wouldn't be so annoyed if there wasn't some part of me that really liked it. I mean, yeah, I did talk for 47 minutes about why I hate Lord of the Rings, but the movies are good. That's why I cared. Fuck you. Just look at some of these designs and the use of negative space. It's wonderfully unique. It's composed so well and visually surpasses much of what I've seen in comics. In addition, the stories that end up getting retold aren't always as cookie cutter as, say, King Arthur. The legend of Teego Kane is something I didn't know of until I read Hellboy, which made me want to seek it out. To see if I could find a good version of the story. Jokes aside, I really do like Hellboy. Even the corpse, despite me criticizing it to hell and back. Get it? I'm funny, I swear. But Hellboy isn't scary, and it's kinda overrated. But it is cool. Even like Hellboy's aloof character can neatly fit into a lot of mythological creatures like Beowulf. I say creatures, but I mean heroes. Who was very uniquely apathetic towards anything, but it was still a hero, so Hellboy kind of fits the description that he has been put into, legend, myth, albeit in very specific ones. I can compare tensions from story to story, like how Teego Kane is tensionally better and fits better to character and how he has to develop like one. But if you said, yeah, but Hellboy is cool, I would not be able to argue with you. Hell yeah, Hellboy is awesome. There's a time to be scared of monsters, and there's a time to just fucking punch them in the face. That's all I'm saying. I have my criticisms of Hellboy, and I definitely don't think it's that good, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't an utter delight to read. So, yeah. Overrated, but still pretty good. In addition, there's a monkey with a gun in the comic once. That alone renders all criticisms null and void. Goodbye!